Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hello, everybody. As you receive this podcast, I will be in Portugal visiting my in-laws and much of my husband's extended family. And if I'm being honest with you, I'm a little nervous about this trip. I'm not nervous about my in-laws. They're very nice and very lucky in that respect, but it's a lot. It is energetically expensive to bring two little boys from Los Angeles to a small rural town in Portugal and to take care of them in a different place for 2 weeks. It's a lot. And it's also important, so we're doing it. And hopefully, as you receive this, I'm having an incredible time, a not overly exhausting time. But please send me all of your good vibes in that direction. Okay. So if you did press play on this podcast, you probably know that what you are now listening to is part 3 in a 3-part series about how to have more energy in your tank at the end of the work week. I'm not going to make my more involved case for why this matters or is useful. The most obvious explanation for why this matters is obvious, of course, because who doesn't want some energy left in their tank at the end of the work week? But I make an even more detailed case for why this matters in part 1 of this podcast. And again, while I do think each of the episodes stands alone and has a lot of useful advice, I do think listening to them in the order that I presented them, it makes sense because the sequencing was intentional. And I think having all the context makes it even better. So one piece of context that I gave in part 1 of this podcast is that how I tend to approach a problem like this with a client is to identify all of the problems or roadblocks that are getting in the way of them saving energy in their tank at the end of the work week, and then try to work on each of these problems. So for the past 2 podcasts, I have talked about 4 common barriers that clients tend to present with and how I might coach on them. So to summarize, those 4 are: number 1, they literally just forget. Number 2, they think that doing this is selfish or it's good for them at the expense of others, and they're not comfortable doing that. Number 3, they're doing way too much and they need to prioritize and, yes, do less. And 4, they're not doing enough cognitively challenging or strategic work that they truly need to do. So then they're overcompensating by literally just putting in more hours. So those are the 4 we've discussed so far in this series. In this podcast, I'm going to discuss 2 more to close us out. That's going to be number 5 and number 6 for those of you keeping track of numeration at home. That's the plan for today's podcast. And now let's get into all the juicy details. Okay, so the 5th common challenge or roadblock, as I said, is that can be holding us back from actually having some energy left in our tanks at the end of the week. The 5th one is that something about how we are showing up to our work, how we are moving through our work days is just tiring. I'm going to call this way of being, like literally the way we are relating to life, to our days is tiring us out. And to me, this is separate from too many meetings or too many projects. This is, even when we're in an appropriate number of meetings or working on an appropriate number of projects, we are doing it in a tiring way. The metaphor that I would give here is of a marathon runner, or really any kind of runner. Running is tiring. It takes energy. And also, you can make it more tiring if you're not careful and intentional. If you're tensing your shoulders and tightening your arms and tensing your legs, you can make the whole thing way more tiring than it needs to be. I want to say here, I've given this metaphor as a person with a small amount of running experience. I did run cross country for a couple years in high school, but hopefully the really serious runners out there are not going to laugh at me with this. But I think this general insight that we can do things in a tense way and it doesn't actually make it better and it does tire us out holds in a lot of fields. Like my understanding of playing the piano, for example, is also that you want to relax your hands. And I would assume this applies to a lot of areas as well. But if we go back to the work topic, if we're trying to save energy at work, it can be a worthwhile endeavor to just say, okay, in what ways am I tensing up? In what ways do I need to relax a little? And how does, again, even just this alone, even if I don't cut any meetings, even if I don't say no to any projects, to go to the running example, maybe you're running the same number of miles, the same number of hills at the same pace, but you are tiring yourself out less because your way of being as you run is less tiring. So when I think about how to coach on this, how do we make it so that you are not tiring yourself out with your way of being at work? I think about two types of tension. One I'm going to call embodied tension, and the other one I'm going to call mental tension. So let's talk about embodied tension first. Embodied tension is tension in your body. Your body is tense. And being tense all day long, it's going to tire you out. And I will say, as I say about many things on this podcast, the ideas that I might offer to a client on this topic are often simple, but do not underestimate their potency. So it might be as simple as giving a client a practice to notice their body when they're on Zoom meetings and consciously relax their bodies. That might just be a thing that they start to do once every Zoom meeting for a week, for example. Notice their body, relax their body. Simple, but probably quite powerful. Another common one, I give this to a lot of clients, is just a little bit of extra movement in their day. So if I can get a client to walk around for 10 minutes in the middle of their workday, they might walk around on the floor of their Manhattan office on the 16th floor, or even better, I have some clients who will take the elevator down and just walk around the block or up and down the block for 10 minutes. Even if genuinely nothing else changes, no meetings are cut, no strategy time is added, all they do is walk for 10 minutes, they will typically feel better. There will be more energy left at the end of the day, the end of the week, than there was previously. Again, even without radically trimming their to-do lists or having that conversation with their boss. And of course, if there's more energy left from taking that 10-minute walk around the 6th floor of your office building, sometimes that does get us into a virtuous cycle where even without making it a conscious goal, because we have just a little bit of more energetic capacity, we naturally make that smarter, more strategic decision about that upcoming project that then saves us even more time and energy or whatever it is. So sometimes then the 10 minutes kind of magically snowballs into even more. But all we are focused on, me and my clients, is just that little 10-minute walk. And then, of course, that becomes one way to reduce embodied tension. And then another sort of common actual way that we reduce embodied tension is just getting my clients to take lunch breaks. And this is one that if this is not a challenge for you, maybe you're going to roll your eyes at, but others of you listening will get it because a lot of you are not taking lunch breaks. A lot of us nowadays, we're not taking lunch breaks. It's lunch at our desks while checking our email, and we do that every day. And a lot of us have a lot of drama about even the idea of taking a true lunch break. And if through coaching, I can get a client to actually start taking a true lunch break, so they're not checking their email, and my dreams are actually not on their computer at all, even if that's all that happens, that they just eat some nourishing food at a reasonable hour, not by 4:30 p.m. They're doing it, before 2 p.m. and they take 20 minutes away from their screen. And nothing else happens. We don't change their mindset or cut things from their calendar or whatever, though sometimes we have to do a little bit of mindset work to even get them to take the lunch. But oh my gosh, it can make such a difference at the end of each week. And again, for some of you, this seems like no big deal, but for those of you who struggle with this will actually be a really challenging practice. I just had a wonderful, beloved former client come back. So many of my former clients are beloved, and tell me that she was now still taking real lunch breaks. Working on that had been a huge part of our coaching together, and it was not easy for her. It took a lot of sessions for her to get past all of her fears and resistances to taking the lunch break. And now she felt like, well, of course I take lunch breaks. And don't you love that? When something goes from feeling so impossible to feeling like a given. And again, it's small, but I bet her days feel really different when she gets that break. So those are some small examples. I'll give one final example here. A slightly more involved example of reducing embodied tension would be that I have a different client who started going to yoga at noon on Fridays, which was a day that she works from home. This particular client actually made a bunch of changes in terms of how she showed up to work. But can you imagine how different your work week might feel even from that? She's a super corporate high achiever. And even for her, this was not something that she did automatically. There was some fear. We did do some coaching on some of her thoughts and feelings and concerns. But she did it and noticed a big difference. And the whole point that I'm making here, in case you haven't caught it, is just that small actions that reduce your embodied tension make a difference for your week as a whole. Some of you are not going to feel comfortable taking that hour for yoga. That's fine. I really believe that 10 minutes to just sort of walk around your office building floor makes a big difference too. So that's the first point about way of being. Even if you can't do anything else, even if you can't get yourself to do anything else, you can still take small steps to reduce your embodied tension. Okay, so that's embodied tension. Remember, I had two forms of tension. So embodied tension, the second one I wanted to talk about was mental tension. At a high level, to me, mental tension just means that our thoughts as we move through our workday can make us even more tense and tired. And if we consciously attend to our thoughts, we can work towards ones that are less exhausting for us. So I'll give one real client example here. I was coaching a client recently, and we realized that she had the thought during her workday, there's so much to do, so I need to move fast. I'll say that one again. There's so much to do, so I need to move fast. I think a lot of us have this thought, right? And in some ways, this thought is quote unquote true. It's certainly true that she had a lot to do, as many of us do. But also, the feeling that as a result, she needed to move fast. On one hand, her brain was definitely saying that that's just logical. If you want to get more done in the same amount of time, you got to move fast. That's a fact. And on the other hand, spending all day feeling like you have to move fast, that creates a certain frantic energy, doesn't it? It can make us feel tired, doesn't it? And the fact that this particular thought might tire us out, that's probably reason enough alone to attend to it. This whole podcast series is about saving energy in your tank. But even beyond that, I would argue that this frantic energy has some interesting downstream effects, namely that we're not always thinking as deeply as we might be. Sometimes, with that frantic energy, we're just very quickly skimming the surface of things, which sometimes leads to more mistakes. Not always, but sometimes. And it certainly leads to missing opportunities to be intentional. When we're moving fast, we're more likely to be reactive. We have 20 minutes and we're like, I'm just going to check my email instead of thinking about whether there's a higher value use of our time, for example. So again, this client's original thought was, there's so much to do, so I need to move fast. And I offered her a new thought. I said, what if you play with the idea that there's so much to do, so I need to slow down? There's so much to do, so I need to slow down. Oh, my whole body relaxes when I say that. And, we talked about the ways in which, how it was possible that this new thought could be true. What are all the ways in which the more that there is to do, actually, the more she needs to slow down? And I think you could probably imagine some of what we came up with, that if she moves slower, she's less likely to waste time. This frantic version of ourselves who suddenly finds ourselves doing sort of lower value work just because it's the easiest thing to grab, easier to check email, easier to respond to chats, whatever it is. And if she goes slower, she's more likely to be intentional. She's also perhaps less likely to make mistakes. So slowing down might actually be more rather than less productive. And from an energy perspective, I don't know about you, I feel calmer in my body and frankly less tired, even as I just begin to entertain the possibility of that being true in my brain. As I begin to think there's so much to do, so I need to slow down, I feel calmer. I feel like I'm burning through less of my fuel. And when you have more energy, you get more done, right? So I'm going to say that new thought again. There's so much to do, so I need to slow down. I wonder what it's like for you to even hear that and sort of let all that, reverberate through you. So that's just one example. This particular thought I think was interesting because we can kind of pretty clearly see how that leads to action and sort of exhausting action. But sometimes it's even more subtle because even the thought, running around your work all day with the thought, I'm not good at this, could be very exhausting. That could really sap the energy out of you. So the invitation here for all of you listening would be to figure out the very specific thoughts that are in your own head during your workday and, what your way of being is as you go through your workday, and figure out if there's something else that could be more, just as true or even more true that you could think instead. I'm not personally really into falsely positive thoughts or sort of falsely positive mantras. I don't want to believe something like unbelievable, like I am a genius. Like if you think you're bad at your job and you're trying to get yourself to think you're a genius, I find that's not super useful. What would I find a thought that you're willing to believe instead? So that's my main point about, is there something about how you're showing up to work and your way of being at work that is tiring to you? Okay, so now the final thing I want to talk about here is how you spend your outside of work time. This is the 6th topic of this podcast series. Okay, so there's 2 things I want to say as I kick off this topic. One is just about why this topic matters. Work life and outside of work life, we want to separate them, but also we can't really totally separate them, right? How we show up at work is highly influenced by how we show up outside of work. Most of us know this when we think of sort of other clear examples. Like we know that professional athletes are so thoughtful about their nourishment and recovery, so that they can then show up to their sport really well. And it matters too if you're a knowledge worker, right? Your ability to be sharp at your job is going to be influenced by your brain's freshness, by your capacity to focus. And if you're spending all of your time when you're not at work, like watching Netflix while also scrolling, while also eating less than nourishing food, that's probably not going to help your recovery. I think we all kind of get that. So on one hand, that's true. But on the flip side, or kind of the second thing I want to say about this is a very delicate topic. Like as I kicked off this podcast at the beginning of the very first episode, one of the things I said is that, it can be a vicious cycle. Like you might not feel able to do these sort of higher quality leisure activities because you're so freaking tired or even burnt out from your work. So there can be a certain stress that some of you might be feeling as I've keyed up this topic. You might be feeling things like, I know I shouldn't scroll while I simultaneously watch Netflix, but I'm so tired and I can't seem to do anything else. So my mantra here is always going to be, do your best, forget the rest. Do your best, forget the rest. And sometimes doing your best and forgetting the rest means this topic isn't for you. You need to cut some stuff at work first to save some energy before you can even think about doing a bit of higher quality leisure in your outside of work time. Like for some of you listening, this topic isn't for you. You're not ready for it. So I want to say that because some of you are beating yourself up about this already. So I want you to know my take. For others of you listening to this, you might just want to focus on harm reduction, even on a very mild level. So I'll say that again. You might just want to focus on harm reduction, even on a very mild level. So a couple ways that this might manifest. It might mean that you watch only Netflix instead of scrolling and watching Netflix. Like that might even be better because you're not dividing your attention. You're not doing so much like short form stuff. That literally might be harm reduction, and it might be a win for you. And it might be easier for you to show up and focus at work versus doing them both. Another example might mean that you mostly do whatever sort of lower quality leisure activities you were planning on doing, but you also just do like a little bit, just a smidge of a doable activity that might replenish you just a bit more. So maybe in addition to mostly scrolling and being on Netflix, you lie on the floor for 2 minutes while doing nothing. 2 minutes. Maybe between episodes, you do 10 minutes of a yoga with Cassandra video. She's my favorite. And yeah, again, there's still 2 hours of just like Netflix and scrolling and mental junk food. But the key here, hopefully you're hearing, is it's really small. Keep most of your nights just the way it is. Give me something small. It really will make a difference. I've seen it make a difference for myself and for my clients. I think we can get very all or nothing about this. And that is the big mistake. Did you hear me? The big mistake is not doing small things. The big mistake is being all or nothing. Everything counts. Partial credit is real. And I just want you to get some points on the board, even if you are still scrolling and YouTubing and DoorDashing, because you're just totally spent the rest of the night. So do your best. Forget the rest. Everything counts. Just be a little bit less stimulating. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of something that nourishes you a little better. Let it help you. And please do not wait until you can do it all perfectly. Okay, team, this is closing out this podcast series. I am so passionate about this topic. I think so many of us are spending energy at work that we do not need to spend. And it's not even necessarily making us better at our work. And it's certainly taking away from our capacity to enjoy and be present for the rest of our lives. I want to do two more quick things before we finish out. The first one is I want to give you another summary. I think when we're listening to things with our ears, we need a lot of summaries. My brain needs a lot of summaries. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you a little summary of the most common objections or challenges that my clients face when they're trying to save energy. So, you're not going to do every single thing I've said in this podcast, but maybe hearing that list can jog for you which of these 6 you want to work on and maybe what practice among that you want to do. Okay, so the number one thing that happens, or a very common thing that happens, is that clients literally just forget. They forget that they're trying to do this thing and they just default to the very energetically expensive version of working that everyone else at work is doing. My first line suggestion here is just a really lightweight, flexible awareness practice. Talk about that in the first episode of this series. The second common problem is that you think that doing this kind of thing, that saving energy, is selfish, or it would be good for you at the expense of others. My recommendation here is that you have to find a way to sell yourself on this, or we could also call it shifting your thinking to something at least more neutral that begins to acknowledge the possibility that doing this might be good for your organization, your team, your clients. I talk more about that again in the first episode of the series. Number 3, you might be doing too much and you need to prioritize and, yes, do less. The logistics of how to do this are not necessarily rocket science. I think what tends to be tricky here is that we have all these kind of thoughts about why we can't possibly do this. So I talk about some of the ways to work with this kind of thinking in episode 2 of the series. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing that tends to come up is that you're not doing enough of cognitively challenging or strategic work that you really do need to do. So then you're overcompensating by just literally putting in more hours. I talk about some pretty tactical, practical ideas for how to get this kind of work done in episode 2 of this series. Yeah, I'll leave that there. And then the 2 we talked about today, number 5 was that your way of being at work is tiring you. And number 6 is that your outside of work time isn't actually helping you recover. Team. There's so much more that I could say about this. Again, this could be a whole coaching engagement, but a lot of it's kind of personalized. So I think that these 6 represent some of the really common, big, high-level challenges that I see clients facing. And before I close this out, I want to say one final thing. I want you to know that it is possible to save energy at work. It is possible. I think that so many of us are in modern workplaces where everybody is just chronically burnt out. You're exhausted. Your colleagues are exhausted. It's this game of chicken where nobody wants to be back off for fear of being perceived as slacking or not high performing or whatever. And I believe I have seen myself that there is a way to approach this that maintains or even improves performance. So I want you to know it's possible. And I also want you to know that in doing this, it will feel like swimming against the current. Let's just call a spade a spade. Most people will not be doing these things. So you may feel a little weird to be doing these things. And sometimes when we're doing things that people aren't doing, we wonder if we're being bad or making a mistake or whatever it is. And I want to offer you a thought, an idea to chew on. I want to leave you with. What if you're being a visionary? What if you're being a genius? What if you're figuring something out that will allow you to be a role model to those who come behind you? I'll give a personal example here. I know someone personally who is really good at saving energy at work while having had very high performance at his organization. And he has told me that the people who work for him, in particular, some working moms who work for him, and working moms have a special place in my heart, being a working mom myself, he has had these women say to him, honestly, I thought that I would only want to progress so far at this organization. I was only ambitious up to a certain point because past a certain point, it seemed like you had to be sort of give up your whole life. And I want to be able to be present with my family. But looking at you, at how you are able to do well, but also not kill yourself, I got ambitious again. It showed me that it was possible to advance and not kill myself. Oh, I feel so moved when I think about this idea. So my take is that you are not figuring this out just to benefit yourself. You are figuring this out so that so many people who come behind you can find a role model in you when they previously did not have a role model. Because we all know that in organizations, there are not a ton of good role models for this. So do it for you. And please, please do it for the people who need to be inspired by and learn from your example. That's all I got for today, team. I hope you will send me positive, energetically frugal vibes for Portugal, and I can't wait to talk to you on the other side. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.